existence of states in itself was the idea that how it managed to stay true towards its social contract. In China's case, we think it has to be looked very closely on what the contract of the government and the society is. And we're going to say, in this debate and analysis, why having democracy is going to destroy the whole contract of the society and the government, in which is going to be the welfare to begin with, and how inserting market system that's inherently attached towards full-fledged democracy is going to destroy the ability of the government to fulfill this particular contract to begin with. Before that, I'm going to respond towards what opening government has been saying. Right? Their argument was the idea of retaliation of people, which we think is a gross simplification of what's happening in China, right? First of all, retaliation from people is not mutually exclusive in non-democratic countries. It also happens in democratic countries. We have like ETA, we have Aung San Suu Kyi, we have, crazy organization that springs out because they're crazy to begin with. And also we have even government in Indonesia, and secessionist army in the United States of America. Problem is, ladies and gentlemen, what you have to see, this kind of people do not reflect the majority of the society that comes in China. That does not reflect on what kinds of things that China wants to begin with. For example, what happens specifically in Xinjiang and Tibet, in which they want to have, the independence to begin with. And every nation in the world is going to react harshly towards the kind of action of rebellion to begin with, ladies and gentlemen. And we're saying, in this case, it's a gross simplification of what they are talking about. Before that, I'm going to take a POI if there's any. No. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the idea of how a certain nation should stay true towards its people. But before that, let's backtrack on what really is China. Right? So the idea of social contract that was formed in every government was relative towards what was amalgamated by society and the government, meaning that every society has its own mandate specifically towards the government. If you happen to read Kissinger's on China, we see that China's society is unique in form that, ladies and gentlemen, it has not had a value evolved for even thousands of years, right? It can be shown from the idea on how they have mandate of having to begin with, which legitimizes them to have rebellion towards their emperors when they think the welfare of the society is not being fulfilled by their emperors. And that has been the reason why every revolution happens in China. From Ming Dynasty to Qing Dynasty to Kuomintang, and then coming to the CPCC, we're saying that every single revolution only stems on one thing: the inability of each government to provide the wealth to its society. Now, this prolongs the idea on how we also see how the society still holds prominence of the Confucianism, even though it bans most of the practices of the religions, right? Because most of the value in China is based on Confucianism. And we're saying that it is what makes China value very unique to begin with. And democracy, ladies and gentlemen, that has been never in touch with the concept of China to begin with, should not ever be mixed in the system to begin with. Now the contract, before that, yeah.
But the people has evolved. We have new people, young entrepreneurs and businessmen in China right now. Why do you have to stick so much with the old values?
Listen, the reason why, ladies and gentlemen, by the way, if you go to China and you ask about them into layman's what they think about the government, they will say like, well, the government is okay. We're thankful we have our government. Now we can afford, apartments. You can afford LCD TV that was provided by the government to begin. Apparently, they're pretty much satisfied with what government has provided them in the status quo. We're saying there is no necessity whatsoever to create this into a full-fledged democracy. But second of all, even in contract, right? In this contract, the fears of how, ladies and gentlemen, the democracy is going to be flawed in itself is, obsolete, because this contract is fulfilled by doing welfare. That's why in Mao Zedong's era, you have challenge of legitimacy coming from Zhou Enlai, Deng Xiaoping, ladies and gentlemen, because the policy of great leap forward and the crazy cultural revolution has destroyed China's economy. The idea, bottom line is, every single revolution that happens in China depends on the ability of that particular nation to produce wealth for the society. And how now, ladies and gentlemen, democracy and simplicity, like freedom of expression and everything, just has been shown in different. We now have Xi Jinping, ladies and gentlemen, that comes as a bottom line of compromise between all factions in China. So even though it's single party, you have to show also that CPCC is a multi-first dimension of a one party with its own faction. Now, what is going to happen, ladies and gentlemen, when you introduce democracy? Definitely, what entails democracy is the ability to have more private sectors. Definitely, less state power, especially in economic capabilities, right? So basically, how China fuels its economy. Most of the corporation is owned by state, right? ICBC, CNOC, China Steel, and so on and so forth. That is the top 10 biggest, top 3 of the 10 biggest corporations in the world. With this money, with this revenue, ladies and gentlemen, they are running the country. Remember on how most of the state enterprises are run by state? Meaning that most of the things, when privatized, is going to severely cripple the ability of the state to make money, ladies and gentlemen, for its 1.2 billion people to begin with. What does it entail? Finally, it's going to make sure that China's privatization, also when we see, even with the status quo with perfectly tight economic policy, we still have a severe Gini coefficient, which shows the income inequality. We're saying that's going to further, ladies and gentlemen, in sharpening the inequality gap. And that's the moment China does not stay true towards its contract towards its society. At that moment, when China can no longer, with no money coming from its government institution to fund the subsidies of port, the subsidies of apartments, the subsidies of LCD TV, and whatsoever corporation that was existing in the Chinese status quo, is what's going to cripple China's welfare. And therefore, at the very end, is going to terminate the whole system, the purpose of this government to exist to begin with. We're saying, ladies and gentlemen, democracy is not an end of a political will. It is a means to achieve the goal of social contract. And we're saying, in status quo, China has done exactly that, with its own way, with the government's way. Thank you very much.